I developed a solution for a problem that I found in my life, and then afterwards realized that actually this solution applies to a much bigger problem, and that it may actually have potentially global impact. So I'd like to start off by thinking about how we all got here today. Some of us probably took the train, some of us jumped in a car, some took a taxi. But I'm guessing that however we all got here, it probably involved an address. And that's good, because everybody made it. And it's also good because we're in France. And in France, we have good addresses. But actually, the majority of the world is not like that. In 75% of countries, there is no proper addressing system. So that would mean that actually only 1 in 4 people would have got here today. The Peruvian economist, Hernando de Soto, puts it like this. He says, without an address, you live outside the law. You might as well not exist. So in those 75% of countries, there's actually 4 billion people who live without an address. If you go to a mapping website or app and have a look at a township in South Africa, slum in India, favela in Brazil, you'll see a few roads, but you'll see a lot of empty space. But you then flip that to satellite view, and in that empty space, you'll see hundreds of houses, homes and businesses and roads. But they're all invisible on the map. In Ghana, you'll see the size of houses, where there's numbers, letters scrawled on the side from piloted addressing systems, which all started, none of which got finished. So actually, it might as well be a bare wall. Economists say that in the next 15 years, 3 billion people are going to join the middle class. Now that would mark the single biggest decline in global poverty yet, but there are 3 big hurdles that stand in the way. The first is that people are unconnected, but with the rise of phones and smartphones, this is getting solved. The second hurdle, people are unbanked, but good progress is being made there. M-Pesa, the mobile payment service, that now contributes 20% of Kenya's national economy. But the biggest problem, the third, the least understood problem is that people are still unaddressed. But actually, no significant progress is being made there. I'd like to tell you about why I even thought about addresses. I spent 10 years working in the music business. I studied music, I lived for music, and I loved working in music. And when you think about the problems of the music business, you'll probably think about problems with downloads and streaming. But actually, I was in the live side of the music business. And the biggest problem for me was people getting lost, trying to find concerts. And every day we went somewhere new, and there'd be endless phone calls because people were lost. The addresses they put in didn't get them there, or there was a specific entrance, and people couldn't find it. So for us, we actually ended up having to employ a specific person who appeared on the schedule as the person that you call when you think you've arrived, and you then figure out you're actually lost. And there was one situation I remember when I got a phone call, and a guy said, hey, Chris, don't panic, but we may have just sound-checked at the wrong person's wedding. And this was life. So I thought I was going to be the tech-savvy music producer in town and fix this. And I was going to fix this with GPS coordinates. So I thought, OK, with this, everyone's going to turn on exactly the right bit of tarmac, so everything will be OK. So we tried this, and I gave everyone these long sequences of numbers. But what I hadn't banked on is that sequences of 18 numbers and human beings do not go well together. People cannot transcribe them from one device to another. They can't say them over the phone very easily or share them in any kind of meaningful way. And so then we got this new problem. Hey, Chris, I'm here. Where are you? Well, I'm here. I don't think you are here. Oh, I thought I was here. Let's just read back the coordinates. 4-5, not 5-4. Ah, okay, I'll be another 2 hours. So they were worse than addresses. And actually nobody does use GPS coordinates, as I found, because even the geography professionals who use them for work, when they go and meet for a beer, they don't meet at 25 degrees, 9 minutes, 40.918 seconds south. The same again, east or west. Nope, they use an address. And if they get lost, they call each other. So nobody has actually solved the problem of a precise system which everybody can use. So a couple of years ago, I had my annual cup of tea with a friend of mine who's a mathematician. And I said, look, we've got to find a solution for this. There must be a way that we can uniquely identify every 3 or so meters on the face of the Earth in a way that everybody can get their head round and nobody's going to get wrong. And so we knew we had to take away this big, long sequence of numbers and find a short way, a small sequence, but with a big list. So we knew we had to fill 57 trillion 3-meter squares in the world somehow. So we played around with it, and then we found our big list, the English dictionary. We figured out that if you took 40,000 words and put them into sequences of 3 words, that's 40,000 cubed. That's 64 trillion combinations of 3 words. That gave us enough combinations to fill those 57 trillion 3-meter squares. So that's exactly what we did. We made a global grid of 3-meter by 3-meter squares and gave a 3-word address to every square. So right now, I'm standing in Truth Roving Photo. And just over the border here, you guys are in Swan Callers Fields. And we've replicated this in 8 languages. We've made the text so small that it all fits on a phone, so it works offline as well as online. And there was one really important thing that we wanted to do to make it properly human-friendly. It had to be human error resistant. So this may make the Microsoft Excel fans among you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but we didn't put our A1 next to A2 next to A3. We actually shuffled our similar-sounding locations as far away around the world as we could. So that if you've got table, chair, lamp in Sydney, we put table, chair, lamps in New York. So if you're in New York and you accidentally put in table, chair, lamp, you're unlikely to set off for the other side of the world. And we're unlikely to take you there. For us, that's much better than them both being in the same city and you potentially going to the wrong place. We will never take you to the wrong place with a system like this. So once we'd made this system, we realized that we'd fixed Chris's music arrival crisis. But then when we looked a little bit more into this problem, my crisis felt a little bit less like a crisis. We found that 4 billion unaddressed number. We found that people were crying out for addresses so that they could get things delivered, so they could secure property rights, so people knew where to send aid, so people knew where stuff was in a natural disaster. And it put my personal problem into perspective a little bit. So when I go to parties, and people ask me what I do and I tell them, I get 2 pretty polarized responses. The first one is, that's kind of cool. That's neat. The second one is, sorry, 3 words. And, sorry, you've actually left your day job to go and label the world with 3 words. And that's fair enough, because if the person asking that question lives at number 82 on the high street and has never had a problem with addresses, then it's fair enough that this guy at a party, me, who's telling him that, you now live at Banana Footprint Lamppost, it's fair enough that he might think I'm winding him up. But let's look at this through the eyes of somebody who does struggle with addresses. So a few months ago, I visited Brazil, to Rio, and a favela there called Rocinha. And I met a guy called Pedro. Pedro is the local surfing champion, but he's also an entrepreneur. He saw a massive opportunity in Rocinha because people there had more buying power than ever before. People were buying flat-screen TVs Yet because there were no addresses, people didn't get simple things like mail. They couldn't get a letter, and they couldn't get a package delivered. So Pedro set up a business doing exactly that. He has the business in Rocinha which gets things to people. So when I told him that every house in his favela had a 3-word address like banana, footprint, radiator, he thought it was absolutely fantastic. And he thought it was so fantastic that we had this in his language, in Portuguese, that he said he wanted to implement it immediately into how they did things. So that's exactly what they did. Over the last few months, Pedro and his team, who built up their business by remembering where people were, they've now been gathering a database of the 3 words for every house in that favela, so that the people who live there know the 3 words, his office knows the 3 words, and they use it as part of their ecosystem. And when I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago, he said to me, Chris, now that we use what 3 words, our operation is so efficient that I can finally scale and grow my business. And I thought that was pretty amazing. So our ambition is that everybody who has that problem, they should be able to know their 3 words and use their 3 words. Where there's Pedro and his favela, there are entire regions and countries who have that same problem. We want to be able to change those people's lives for the better by being a global standard for addressing. I'd like to leave you with the notion that every place in the world, the most beautiful places, the most fun places, the most critical and vital places, they all now have an address. And that lack of global addressing, that is a massive and complex problem. But we're on a mission to solve that with just 3 words. Thank you.